All right, welcome to the Harmony Channel. I'm Jason Whitlock. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm joined by Chad Jackson. You guys remember Chad. I'm sure he's been on the show frequently. He's been the best historian, researcher, broadcaster explaining the impact of Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement. Today, I want to talk with Chad about the Supreme Court decision that came down, I believe, Tuesday, that grants birthright citizenship basically to illegal immigrants. You come over here, have a baby, then go back to your own country, and your baby gets to claim that he's an American citizen, these anchor babies. And they're saying the Supreme Court upholds birthright citizenship. My interpretation is no, they've applied birthright citizenship to illegal immigrants when the 14th Amendment was formulated to grant citizenship to former slaves and to the children of slaves. And so that's where I want Chad to first start out by helping me out understand the 14th Amendment, the Dred, which I think is 1868, and its connection to the Dred Scott decision. But before I do that, I just got to say, and no pause necessary here, but Chad, I love this Afro bearded look you've adopted. It's made you look more hip. I think it's a great call by you. So if you don't recognize Chad from previous, but he's grown an afro, and I think it makes him look a bit more scholarly and just a tiny bit hip. But anyway,
Yeah, I've
Chad,
been
you
in
want to
the
comment on that? Yeah.
I've been in the dungeon working hard on some new projects, and haven't had a chance to get out to the barber or anything like that. So I kind of let myself go, but I'll get back in the swing of
No,
things.
I'm telling you, I think you should keep it. I've been seeing it everywhere. It's like, oh, that's a fresh new look for Chad. Uh,
I'm trying
and
to get like you because you looked one way and then you went away and you came back with a goatee. So
yeah,
you got to
yeah,
switch it up every now and then.
yeah. So anyway, Chad, let's just start with your interpretation. Am I right that they've applied the 14th Amendment to a group that it was never intended for?
You're absolutely right, and that's the general argument that's made by the dissenters of this absurd decision. When you look at, for example, um, Justice Clarence Thomas's dissent, he wrote a independent dissent. He basically was able to lay it out in plain terms and was able to cite his sources that the 14th Amendment applied to freedmen who were in America for generations and had no allegiance to any other nation. And then he quoted Frederick Douglass, who said that citizenship belongs to those who fought, bled, and died for this country, who were domiciled to this country. Domicile is just a fancy word for those who have a permanent intention of being pledging allegiance to one nation and living there in perpetuity. And so that's what it was about. I personally disagree with the decision to enact the 13th and 14th Amendment, but that's a different story for a different day. But when it comes to the matter at hand, um, what would happen over the course of the 20th century is that there would be a kind of broadening and hyper liberal interpretation of the 14th Amendment, which would then apply to people who are not domiciled, who have no allegiance to this country, who are here temporarily to have a baby here and to have dual citizenship or something of that nature. And it's become a thing that is more abused than it is used with good intentions. And so um, I think that this was a question not of whether the 14th Amendment was good or not, but rather over it should have been a question over should we do something about the fact that this is something that is routinely abused.
You've said something fascinating that you're saying, hey, talk about that later. I can't because it's so fascinating. You you think the 13th and 14th Amendment were unnecessary or shouldn't have been implemented?
Uh, I don't think it should have been implemented because of the fact that, after the war between the states, what you saw happening was a lot of carpetbaggery. You saw the North, quite frankly, imposing its will on the South, treating the South as if they were a conquered territory rather than co-equal citizens. And so the circumstances under which those amendments were enacted, I think, was kind of strong arm thuggery. Quite frankly, I think that there was a more rational way to go about it. I think a lot of what was done during Reconstruction was uncalled for. But I know that that's not going to win me a lot of fans. But there's a deep, nuanced history to this that I think people should look more into.
So, if not for the 13th and 14th Amendment, would you and I or our ancestors, black ancestors from years ago, would they have American citizenship?
I believe so. I think that we were gradually getting there. And again, this is I kind of regret that I opened up that can of worms because that's a conversation in itself, and I don't want that to dominate this conversation. Although I'm happy to have it with you, if you want to go there, if you want to set it aside for another harmony show. But yes, I do think that if you read the history, if you read what was going on during those days, and if you're able to bring yourself to look past this kind of northern propaganda, which is what we all receive when it comes to slavery history or antebellum history. Um, it kind of frames the South in a way that's not true to reality. And so my approach to history is to look at all sides, to look at what, to not, for example, just take at face value a historian's interpretation of Jefferson Davis, for example, who was the president of the Confederate States, but rather to read Jefferson Davis himself. What was he actually saying? To read, as I have, the testimonials of Confederate soldiers who, for example, argued that we weren't fighting for slavery. In fact, we're happy that slavery ended. We were actually fighting for states' rights. So it's unfortunate that we are routinely kind of conditioned to ignore what they were actually saying and to instead take at face value an interpretation by those who have a political agenda of what they were saying. And so, again, this is a very complex thing, but when you look at how, for example, many slave owners treated their slaves during and after slavery, when you look at the fact that a lot of them wrote in their wills, or even while they were alive, set their slaves free or allowed them to buy themselves their freedom. These were things that were trending in, I believe, the right direction. And what we get with the 13th and 14th Amendment is that it would open up it will kind of plant the fertile soil, if you will, for a lot of what we're experiencing today. And so we have this tendency in this country to move hard and fast because the sky is falling. And in so doing, we are basically setting a kind of slippery slope for a kind of decline of the nation. And I think that we should, as Thomas Sowell argues, not look at policies and legislation and Supreme Court decisions and such as solutions. We should look at them as trade-offs. We should count the costs and consider, okay, what are we achieving and what are we giving away? And so there's a better way. I'm not saying that slavery is great. We should have kept slavery. I'm saying that yes, slavery should have had its sunset, but it should have been done in a smarter way.
I'm going to tell you, and yes, we are slightly off topic, but it's so fascinating and important that I can't ignore the conversation because, I'm becoming just as radicalized as you. And part of it is like, I don't know if me and Pastor G. Craig Lewis had this conversation about hip hop and these African customs that are being brought into America through hip hop music and how Black Americans became so Afrocentric. And he opened my mind to like, okay, what do we know about Africa really? And if you really dig into it, it's like, what are we trying to connect to? A bunch of religions that were very tribal, that connected
Paganism.
to satanic beliefs, and it's made me, Chad, and this is why I can't ignore the conversation. It's like someone recommended this book to me called Out of America, and I don't know why I keep Peyton, look up Out of America. I think it's the guy's name is Richburg, maybe his last name, but I gotta call the name. Keith Richburg, yeah, written it. And I think this is written in the 90s because he was stereotypical liberal black man working for the Washington Post. And he got an assignment to open up or to lead the bureau they had in Africa. And I think they were based in Nairobi. And so
Mm.
he ends up covering unrest in Somalia, in Rwanda, in these really black parts of Africa, the far less colonized parts of Africa, and he basically got ostracized for telling the truth. They're like,
Right.
holy cow, it's crazy over here, and these people are splitting each other's heads open with clubs and tree
Hmm.
limbs, and it's like, and the religions are crazy, and they
Right.
can't get along, and he wrote the truth, and then like the left turned on him. He's an Uncle Tom, he's a coon, blah blah
As
blah.
per usual.
Yeah, and so it's like it's made me start like, okay, there's this romanticized version of Africa, and then there's reality. And I've
Hmm.
already said this previously. I said, so let's say you're some explorer that goes over to Africa back in the 1600s, 1700s. And if this is going on in the 1990s, what Keith Richburg describes, what do you think was going on in the 16, 1700s? And you sit there and you wonder how people could reach the conclusion like, man, they'd be better off working for me on this plantation back in America or in the Caribbean than dealing with what they do. I'm gonna feed them, and
Yeah.
we're not gonna kill them. And so it's a very uncomfortable realization to come through. Most people's minds aren't ready for that, and
Hmm.
they and so the
Yeah, I can imagine the comment section just with what I was saying and with what you were saying. But I mean, the fact is, we're grown men, and I expect that the audience are grown adults, and I just ask people to, turn off your kind of like reflexive, because a lot of us are conditioned to have this kind of reflexive reaction to the truth, which is in a sense what you're talking about. The reaction to telling the truth gets you canceled, it gets you ostracized, it gets you blackballed, so on and so forth. But you're absolutely right, and you hit the nail on the head. I mean, when you look at a continent like Africa and a lot of what's gone on there for centuries, there's no comparison to the decency and the respect for humanity that we've seen in the West under Christianity, even with slavery. It's just a fact. I mean, for example, you look at a lot of black activists today, they talk about, the days of lynching and the atrocities that white people did against blacks. Well, if you look as recently as the, Nelson Mandela regime there in South Africa, I mean, they were necklacing people. They were taking tires, putting them around people's bodies, gouging them with gasoline and setting them on fire, which is a form of lynching. That's actually, I would argue, worse than being hung by a rope from a tree. I'm not romanticizing being hung by a rope from a tree, but I'm just saying that the brutality is far more severe over there on that continent than it is over here. And then, too, when you look at, to take it back to the matter at hand, when you look at English common law, which America would later adopt as it became its own nation, which kind of set the groundwork for the kind of liberty that we would see through conventional progress. A lot of the issues were being dealt with without the need for activism, without the need for Marxism, which would be turned up and vamped up at the latter half of the 19th century and well into the 20th century. America was already on its way, but because of accelerationism, because of a lot of these tactics that basically co-opted that conventional progress and moved us into this, unrecognizable direction, we find ourselves here in 2026 doing podcasts, doing shows, writing books, doing documentaries, trying to give people an understanding of our history that we might try to turn it back in the right direction. Birthright citizenship is yet another example of how we've gone far off the rails.
And 20, 30 years from now, 50 years from now, people, oh, so this is what birthright citizenship led to. No one over here speaks English, or I got to speak 3 different languages to order DoorDash or to,
Yeah.
check in at the airport. And I've got all these different, again, because I'm sorry, but this is just real. I'm reading this book and I'm reading what was normal over in Somalia and what is a level of corruption. The guy's book, and he was just talking about Africa, not just Somalia, but he's like, the first lesson you learn in Africa is, I'm like, as soon as you touch down on the plane, from the plane and disembark from the plane, you learn that there are lies you have to tell just to reach your hotel, just to travel around. And so it like normalizes a level of lying just for everyday interaction. It's so corrupt over there that there are these accepted lies that everybody knows you just tell. Well, don't tell them you have this. Don't tell them nothing's going to happen to you. But again, just lie, 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 lie. I mean, you have to read it. His explanation is amazing. And you'll think, man, because, America is starting to experience that kind of corruption because we've imported all these people with different values that come from a different culture where, and again, like in Somalia and some of these other countries, like there's a level of lying that's just baked into living in these countries, and they bring that mentality here, and your country becomes unrecognizable. Your values become completely outdated, and I don't want to go too big with this, but because maybe people can't see the through line, but that's how you get to a point where there are people sitting here that have adopted these African cultures and customs and ingested all the hip hop deal. That's how you get someplace and you say, well, hey man, if a 17-year-old kid puts his hands on you, you can stab them in the heart and kill them, and that's self-defense. Because now, trust me, in Africa, that's a legitimate defense. Like, things are so corrupt and so violent in some of these countries that they have that oh, you put your hands on me, I get to stab and kill you. It's no big deal. That's what we do. That's been imported here to America. And we're anyway.
No, I mean, I think the kind of juxtaposition that you're making there is the kind of civilized, or what's supposed to be the civilized mindset that is a staple of Western civilization, that's fast fleeting. That there is no respect for decency in the same way in a lot of these African countries. I hate to say it, but it's true. And you're right, like 20, 30 years from now, when we see the kind of logical conclusion of a lot of these things taking place, and we find ourselves strangers in our own nation, we'll see. And maybe even then we still won't see because we're so indoctrinated. But it's unfortunate to see that kind of disrespect for decency, disrespect for civility and civilization represented in the Supreme Court. I mean, Ketanji Brown Jackson's opinion was just a mess. It was a whole mess. And it's interesting because her solo opinion was a direct shot at no other justice but Clarence Thomas. I believe she wrote that opinion specifically for the Black woke activist community. No one else. There was very little, if any, acknowledgement of constitutional precedents. It was all about activism. She pays homage to organizers. She uses the word organizers several times in her opinion. She uses language from social media culture, talking about understanding the assignment. And what's interesting about her even is that she brings up the Declaration of Independence and that all men are created equal. What are you doing writing that in a decision about birthright citizenship? The question isn't whether all men are created equal. I can hold that all men are created equal, and the belief that we should have strong borders and that America belongs to Americans. I can hold that in the same fist. I don't. Those two realities are not contradictory to each other. All men are created equal does not equal everybody gets free access to citizenship. But in Ketanji Brown Jackson's mind, they're one and the same. And so Clarence Thomas is contradicting himself when he's making a constitutional argument against birthright citizenship. The difference is very vast. Here you have Clarence Thomas making a very scholarly, very constitutional argument. He's citing his sources. He's referring to cases. He's laying it all out to where a 3-year-old can understand it. I mean, he's using legal jargon, but he's writing in such a way that makes you feel smart, that makes you feel like, man, I want to get in the law myself. But then you have Ketanji Brown Jackson, who's responding to Clarence Thomas, and there's little, if any, again, looking at what is the constitutional precedence. She's talking about activism. She's talking about social justice. She's talking about organizing and how, when those who enacted the 14th Amendment understood the assignment. This is crazy, and this is what we have represented on our Supreme Court. It's asinine, but my thinking is that if we don't do something about this, if we don't have a cultural revival, you'll have more Ketanji Brown Jacksons on the Supreme Court in the next 30 years.
Chad, I'm listening to our conversation, and I was like, hey, my instincts were great. Hey, bring Chad on to talk about this. And because we got to keep having these conversations publicly, and because there's no else place to get it. No one's bold enough or in a position enough or obedient enough to, just rely on God and deal with the consequences. That, if we don't have these conversations, they're just not going to get had, and people will never even hear of them. And it's just like, some of the things you've said, and I've said in real time, I was like, holy cow, that's crazy, man. You really said that? But the more I dig deep, it's like, man, I get where he's coming from. And I'm going to say just as crazy things that are just so plainly obvious, that all cultures are not created equal. And
No, they're not.
And so all men are created equal. And you know what, Chad, I'm going to have to bring you back so you and I can discuss my assimilation, incarceration, reservation solution. That we offer people assimilation, then they don't want to get along, then we offer them incarceration. And then if they really don't want to get along, we put them on a reservation. It's what we did with Native Americans.
Right.
And it's what we have to do. If there's going to be this black fatigue problem, if there's going to bring, hey, I'm Afrocentric, and I know Wakanda's not a real place, but I'm going to recreate Wakanda here in America. If these dodos have to be put, let them do it. They can give them, I'm suggesting Georgia and maybe another state, and they get to do all that. They get to create Wakanda, a place that doesn't exist. And trust me, it's going to look like Rwanda and Somalia. That's what they're going to do.
You're a little too liberal for me on that one. I think we should move them out to Guantanamo Bay or something like that. They should not be in the intercontinental United States.
That's the incarceration option.
Okay.
That's the incarceration option. I'm saying
there's still good parts of Georgia.
You know what I'm saying? We got to give up something. We got to live someplace. And so I'm open for better suggestions. But, if I say Idaho, a lot of white folks are going to be, I got to move from Idaho? I done moved all the way up here to get away from these people. Now you want to import them here? But we're going to have to circle back to this conversation. And Chad, I really need to try to get you on here once a week, just me and you, because I need to give you room to unpack all that you know. Thank you so much for making the time today. And thank you guys for watching Harmony. We'll see you next time.